Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Thank you very much.
Και από το να κρατάω το μικρόφωνο. Δεν κάνω ούτε όνει και τίποτα. Θέλεις.
Έτσι, να πάρω το...
Αφήστε τον άτεντο. Ελεοκλή!
Τους βουλευτών μπροστά ρε. Τους βουλευτών να τους μπροστά.
Καταφέρνετε το πατώ. Πάει. Δεν είναι μόνο, δεν φέτος.
Έλα, Σούζη, βγαίνεις εσύ. Μινά.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Must be thank you very much.
Recovery. I really want to thank our sponsors because they made available these excellent facilities to us tonight. We mark this evening nearly 4 decades of military occupation and colonization in Cyprus. 39 years of anguish for the relatives of the missing, many of them here with us tonight. The utter injustice of division, ethnic cleansing, cultural genocide, religious desecration. These consequences are the pernicious legacy of Turkey's invasion of Cyprus in 1974. But the tragedy of this island is made even more profound because of the will of the international community, the will of the United Nations, has been repeatedly defied with complete impunity by successive Turkish governments for nearly 40 years, which makes today an anniversary of failure too, the failure of the international community to hold Turkey to account. Cyprus is up against an authoritarian and intolerant Turkish Prime Minister who has a problem with pluralism in his own country. Mr. Erdogan has shown no sign of engagement in relation to Cyprus, other than on his own terms, which would mean the island's total capitulation to Turkey's neo-Ottoman demands. The island's indigenous people, whatever their ethnic origin, and their wishes are the last thing on Mr. Erdogan's mind. This year, our plea to our friends in Parliament carries even greater urgency because this event takes place against the backdrop of the unprecedented economic crisis which has engulfed the island following the Eurozone's and the IMF's selective and unacceptable measures which have devastated Cyprus's economy and which some want to exploit in order to impose the permanent partition of the island. The United Kingdom remains a crucial player. It has historic treaty obligations in relation to Cyprus. It maintains military bases on the island, and it is Cyprus's partner in the European Union, in the United Nations, and in the Commonwealth. It is also a strategic ally of Turkey. As such, we believe that British parliamentarians are absolutely pivotal to the Cypriot diaspora's mission to deliver long-lasting unity and justice for Cyprus. So on behalf of our community, I express our profound thanks and appreciation to all of our friends in Parliament. And I appeal to you, gentlemen, I appeal to your sense of justice and to the ideals of liberty and democracy which symbolize our togetherness in this truly unequal struggle. Thank you very much for your help. I look forward to your contribution and the discussion tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, and it's a great honour to be described as a friend, and so thank you. It's a wonderful thing to be your friend, and a friend, hopefully, to Cypriots here. I do have the great luxury of representing the wonderful city of Cambridge, and it's a shame that George isn't here. I hope many of you know George. He's a wonderful man. I've got to know him over the last few years, and I'm particularly pleased he's now become Deputy Mayor of Cambridge. I think it's the first Cypriot Deputy Mayor that we've had in Cambridge. I know you've had others around the country. We hope next year he'll be the Mayor of Cambridge, which will be the natural succession. I hope the elections go the right way to make sure that that happens. I don't want to speak very much because actually Peter's captured so much of what really matters, and also before we have the votes and various other things that unfortunately hold us up the time, I'd rather hear from you because you all know the area far better than I do. To my shame, the only time I've ever been to Cyprus was to one of the military bases, landing there for a few hours and then leaving. I don't think I got to see the best of the island at all. But there are two things which are just so important I want to say a bit about. One is the short term, the economic problems that we have in Cyprus, and the fact that we absolutely do have to find ways of resolving it. We can't allow Cyprus to be sort of pushed off because of machinations within other bits of Europe. We can't allow it to be ignored by Britain. I know there is, I'm not going to tread too heavily into the argument about Britain's involvement with Europe, but we should be involved with Europe, we should be involved with Cyprus. We should make sure, we're talking earlier about trade, to try to make sure that we can help Cyprus trade out so it can become the prosperous nation that it really needs to be. And I also just wanted to say, and I agree with much of what you said about the long term. I don't remember 74, I wasn't born yet. But there is a fundamental principle that nobody should be gaining territory by military invasion, by occupation. It is simply not right to sediment control over it by bringing people in, importing a population until you have enough people to lay a claim. That's simply not a way that we can allow. I have to admit, Britain has a long history of occupying places via very much that method, but that doesn't make it all right, and the Turkish approach is simply not acceptable. It is absolutely right that we remember what has happened there and that we take steps about it. We do have to do more to reach a resolution. I was asked earlier whether I thought there would be a resolution in our lifetimes. I hope so. I hope it will be in the lifetimes of everybody in this room. It's not going to be easy, but it is absolutely right for you to hold us to account for what we do. And I accept that we need to do more to make sure we reach a resolution, that Turkey doesn't get away with occupying territory through military force, that no country ever gets that right, and we return Cyprus to being a freer, fully united, peaceful area, and hopefully doing a lot better at trade. So thank you very much for inviting me and for describing me as a friend.
Thank you very much, Julian. I appreciate those words. Before I move on to David, I'd like to acknowledge the presence here of Tom Cox, former Member of Parliament, a great friend of the island, and he's here with us once again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I have more Cypriot electors than Cypriot members of Parliament. But it's, as I said previously, and I'm just reflecting on what my 8 times probably been here previously of saying, am I going to say anything different? And that's the tragedy of it all in many ways, of coming here again and coming on the back of obviously people remembering earlier outside Parliament missing persons, of just the human loss and tragedy of the Cyprus problem, as we all call it, and how we all long to come here to be able to be celebrating a solution and a united, just settlement. And so it's always a tragedy coming back together again year after year and seeing what has changed. And what makes it even worse is that we, and I know colleagues are involved in lots of other areas of concern around human rights abuses, of injustices, of loss of property, land and people and of rights. And we reflect on those, and indeed those countries where dramatic progress has been made. Next week, President Thein Sein, the President of Burma, will be coming over. That's a country which people wouldn't have thought in any way would have had any semblance of democracy and respect for human rights, and it's starting the small steps in that regard. And indeed, we're welcoming the President to these shores to be able to see how far he can go. There's a long way to go in that country, but wouldn't it have been wonderful if, come September, as we welcome President Anastasiades, that it would have been on the back not just of looking at the immediate issues and economic crisis, but to be able to celebrate a united Ireland and proper respect for human rights. And what I reflect, and I know friends here, and Tom's friends has been involved for many years, and with Jim and others who do very much stand up on a cross-party basis for Cyprus, how what we need to be doing, and this reminds us more, is that we need to ensure that as energised as many colleagues are around other countries, I mentioned Burma, but other countries where there is, and has been for so many years, flagrant human rights abuse, that similarly so, we are as active as we can be in relation to Cyprus. And I've spoken previously how we have almost this sort of, we have a Cyprus problem people talk about, and people almost get used to tolerating what is unacceptable. And what this month reminding, and I know you rally in other ways, is this shouldn't be tolerated. We shouldn't get used to it. We shouldn't tend to have that sort of fatigue of thinking, well, this is as it is, because in a European nation, in a Commonwealth nation, in as part of a family of respect for human rights, this just shouldn't be accepted. We shouldn't tolerate the occupation of force. We shouldn't tolerate land forcibly taken and the lack of proper justice and respect for human rights. And so we need to be reminded, and that's why it's important that you all do come year on, year out in numbers to tell us, yes, and you show us the photos of those who are lost and where the basic knowledge of knowing the truth of where loved ones have gone is unacceptable. And it's totally unacceptable that this is tolerated. And you're right to remind us that we need to seek justice and truth and hopefully reconciliation based on United Nations resolutions. But in the way that we must, and we do as much as we can, stand up and speak up for Cyprus and speak to ministers, as much as we do that, we also need to ensure that we take practical measures to recognise that as, yes, the leaders are looking to have talks later in the autumn, that in the meantime and almost beyond, that we raise those issues which shouldn't just be subject to negotiation, that any country, any peoples that are concerned about respect for human rights and the rule of law and justice will be wanting to make progress. And that includes, and indeed, you mentioned, sorry to arrive late, but you mentioned the whole issues of liberty and democracy and what's, that this country, has stood tall in those areas, and it should stand tall in the areas, particularly given our relationship with Cyprus, given the representations here of UK citizens and constituents and others. We should stand tall in standing up for these areas, to say it is intolerable what's happening for Famagusta. It's intolerable for those people who want to return with a lack of respect for us. It's intolerable, and it's something that shouldn't continue. And so I will be joining with others to make sure that we indeed remind the Prime Minister, as we've done previously, that every opportunity he needs to be making the case to Turkey that this is not acceptable. That we shouldn't have a frozen village that's frozen out of time in what should be a modern, civilised way of looking at things. And also, indeed, the missing persons, which is highlighted again for us today, that shouldn't be tolerated, that there is information out there. There are European court judgments that need to be followed and complied with. And we need to make sure that happens. And yes, when we hear those voices in Taksim Square, the people voices who are speaking out against the Turkish government, bravely speaking out against authoritarian rule of heavy-handedness, similarly so, the same application of respect for human rights and freedom must apply to the missing persons and relatives to their, and must apply to the villagers and the association represented around Famagusta, and must apply to the most heavily militarised place pretty much in the planet, as is north of Cyprus. And it must apply because it makes sense politically, it makes sense from a base of human rights. It also makes sense, and that's obviously particularly relevant, from an economic point of view and a sustainable point of view for the island. And all that must come together. So we are looking very practically at wanting to do what we can to raise those voices and not just simply go in line with the talks that will hopefully take place soon and will lead to real results, but also make sure that we don't tolerate the intolerable. But also, just in conclusion, there is a lot of practical work to do, because obviously since we've last here, we've had the awful economic crisis in Cyprus, and we do need to obviously realise that as a diaspora here, you're very concerned about that, and that's why with the National Federation, we're really working very hard. And I have to just, not to sort of take issue, but just to say that it's not an issue of our relationship with Europe. Actually, it's Britain that has stood tall with Cyprus in this crisis. And it's very marked that it is the British government that was there, the Treasury officials were out there to make sure that, yes, they could ensure that there was an appropriate deal could be made that could protect as best as possible likely investors and depositors. And it is indeed ministers who are working very hard practically. I mean, this isn't to say in any way that the situation is in any way perfect, but working very practically, and we can witness that in terms of the time that ministers have taken to meet with us, to look at very practically a package that they can provide as much support as possible. And yes, work to see what potential trades and investment opportunities there can be down the line to make sure that we support Cyprus in these times of need and make sure that Britain of all nations is a friend, and a friend that's needed when it's very much needed today. So yes, we need to do that practically in the immediate issues around the economy, but also the very much dear issues that we all care about, which is return human rights and respect for freedom to Cyprus. Thank you.
More important than Northern Ireland, but I would be telling a lie simply because when you're in opposition, you can choose when to vote and not when to vote. So I don't think, I think my vote is needed anyway, and we've been told we're in a one-line vote. So unfortunately, the guys who are running the country have to go and vote, and I don't. But can I say that, just in terms of housekeeping, I can just speak briefly about the group, the parliamentary group in Cyprus. We were under quite a significant amount of pressure, and some of you may have been at meetings complaining that we were too biased towards the Cypriot, the Greek Cypriot, and not paying much attention to the Turkish Cypriot side. And we took that on board, and we made some changes to the group. We've a new secretary. And the reason I'm saying that is quite simple, because it proved to be an absolute nightmare. And the person who took over, they just continually tried to disrupt the group and just make matters worse. And I know David Burrows is far too modest for me to say this, and I'll need to go and wash my mouth out after supporting a Tory, but he's been extremely good, and I have to say to you, Peter, he has been under tremendous pressure back in his constituency from the person that took over the role of secretary. She has made his life extremely difficult. But thankfully, she's moved on. We convinced her that she wasn't the best person for the job, and we got someone else to move in, which is Jim Dobbin, who's a Labour MP, so we are delighted with that. Having said that, I'm sorry that I'm now becoming a veteran of these events, and apologise in advance for it. It's a title I wouldn't like to hold as a veteran of these events, but unfortunately that's where we are. And I hear people talking about the financial difficulties, and I'm extremely sorry that Cyprus has been caught up in this austerity situation, and I sincerely hope that you get yourselves out of it. And I don't think the IMF and others are being extremely helpful in trying to help you through in terms of some of the demands, extreme demands that have been putting on your government. On the question of Turkey, I take the view that I think that Turkey have enough problems of their own just now in terms of human rights and in terms of the riots that were taking place recently. And also the pressures that's on their borders for what's happening in Syria in terms of them taking in refugees. And I would have thought now would have been an ideal window of opportunity for Turkey to look after itself and leave Cyprus alone to go on with it. And I think that's the kind of arguments that we need to pursue. David Burrows is absolutely right. We do meet on a regular basis with the ministers to talk through Cyprus, but it's sometimes it's frustrating for us, but it must be 100 times more frustrating for you because you're the people that's involved in it. But we do meet with the European Minister on a regular basis. And the last time we met with him, and I don't want to raise hopes in any way, but the last time we met with him, he was far more optimistic now than what it has been for some time. So we just hope that that develops into some practical changes that we can put pressure on our own government and indeed the Turkish government to come to some sort of satisfactory conclusion. And I know for a number of years that the Turkish government haven't taken negotiations seriously, and, even under the threat of not being allowed into the European market. There is a school of thought now that given the state that Europe's in and the euro, that maybe Turkey doesn't want to be into the European market, but that's another argument. I think we need to keep that pressure on. The other thing I think that's important as well is the minerals that's been found off the coast of Cyprus. And I'm genuinely concerned that this could be a diversion for Turkey to interfere in Cyprus' problems in terms of minerals. And I sincerely hope that the British government takes a firm line and saying quite clearly to Turkey and indeed others that the minerals found off the coast of Cyprus belong to the people of Cyprus and no one else. And I really don't think it should be up for negotiations to pacify the Turks, that they should have in any way some sort of percentage or otherwise of the minerals that's found there. And I just hope that we follow that through. Just finally, Peter, on the question of missing people, I'm on the Council of Europe, and I think I've said to people before that we are currently embarking on a report about missing persons, not just in Cyprus, but throughout the Caucasus and Russia and various other places. But the one, and I can say the one I've paid perhaps more attention to, as I'm the rapporteur on the committee, and the one we've paid the most attention to is the situation in Cyprus. We will be producing our report at the next European Council, which is in October. But I have to say, without giving anything away, I think Cyprus has come out of this report, and we worked alongside the International Committee for Red Cross, who were extremely helpful giving us the information. But I think Cyprus and the Cypriot authorities have come out extremely well compared to other countries in the sense of giving people information about where their loved ones are, where they've been buried, etc., etc. The Cypriot authorities have been extremely helpful, and unfortunately we can't say that for other countries who have been, the exact opposite. They've been obstructive in terms of trying to get information from them where people's loved ones are, whether they be buried or else or whatever. But we are working on that, and hopefully we can get some sort of conclusion to that. So as I say, we're launching that report on October, and hopefully we would like to name and shame some of the countries that are not giving us the information that we require, but I'm told, unfortunately, that's not the way that we do things. My way, that's the kind of thing that I would do. But what we're also trying to do in the Council of Europe is put pressure on the individual countries in the Council of Europe, including Turkey, to say to their delegates that you have a responsibility to go back to your national government, not to get involved in the problems of 1974, but to say quite clearly that they have a responsibility to give the information to the relatives and the friends of the missing people. And that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we're trying to remind the delegates from Turkey and indeed other countries as well about the missing people, because it's never, ever going to go away, and we cannot ignore it. And we keep saying to people, you know, you can't ignore this forever. At some stage, you're going to have to give us the information that we require, and it would be better doing it now so we can move on, because that's the important thing. But just in terms of places, and this place, I mean, you have a lot of friends in here in terms of parliamentarians. It's unfortunate not too many here tonight, but there's been other things that have been going on. And I'm delighted that you brought the son with you. That's perhaps the reason why a number of my colleagues are away somewhere else. But that's it. But all I should say is that anything that we can do as a group, as individuals, call us anytime, contact us, and if you think there's anything that we can do to try and bring some sort of satisfactory conclusion to the island of Cyprus, then we're happy to do it. We're here to help you, and I just ask you to make sure that you use us and use us well. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Peter, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am very conscious as a Member of Parliament for the City of Southampton that we have a large and active Greek Cypriot community, and it is a real pleasure to see some of them represented here this evening. As Peter has alluded, I do not profess to be an expert on Cyprus, but what I do know is that I can recognise an injustice when I see one. And I can recognise a country that for 40 years nearly has been struggling for justice, for the families of those who have been missing to be given the information that they do not just deserve, they have a right to. And I firmly believe that Turkey has a duty to now start discussions, to uphold its UN obligations, and to provide for those families the closure and the information that they are very much seeking and have absolutely a right to have. I apologise. This evening is, as ever, one of those jumbled up parliamentary evenings where we have votes running all night long, where I gather the plumbing of the wonderful palace we're in has failed. And so I apologise if there are few of my colleagues here and if I have to rush off the next time we have a division. But certainly I will stay as long as I can to hear the views of those represented, and I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you for annually taking the trouble to come into Parliament and to make sure that we hear the message that those missing Cypriots are not forgotten. Thank you.
As everyone in this room knows, summed up very clearly that after 39 years, the injustice for the Republic of Cyprus and the Greek Cypriot community is still there after 39 years. Now, all of us in this room know the many attempts that were made by different presidents of the Republic to try to get an honourable settlement. And that, to me, Peter, really wasn't impossible. It was impossible, as report after report has shown, and it's all on the record, because of the attitude for many, many years of Ralph Danktash. That's why there was no progress. And what I would like to hear this evening, and possibly our Member of Parliament can tell us, where on the political agenda in the coalition, or indeed in the Labour Party, is Cyprus today. Because we know in that region there is turmoil, there is Syria, there is Egypt. Today there have been bomb attacks in the Lebanon. Now, are we going to be told, Peter, oh, Cyprus is a very, very important issue. We know the injustices, but there are more pressing issues at the moment that we've got to be involved in. So I would really like to know where Cyprus is on the political agenda. Is it somewhere, or is it high on the list? Because I'll give two examples, what deeply concerns me. There was an article very recently in the Times, and it was by Jack Straw. And Jack Straw was the Foreign Secretary for many, many years. And what Straw was saying in this article, he didn't refer very much to Cyprus, But he said the unrest in Turkey, the only way to resolve that is by offering, as quickly as possible, membership of the European Union to Turkey. The other thing I would say, Peter, in the debate in the Lords on the Queen's speech, there were members of the Lords, and they were Conservative members. They were talking about Cyprus, but how they described it was the Turkish Federation of Northern Cyprus. So to them, already the occupation and the occupied areas are no longer part of the Republic of Cyprus. They now belong to the Turkish Federation of Northern Cyprus. And I'm sorry to say that I haven't seen the British government or indeed the Labour Party making any comments rebuffing what the members of the Lords said. So Peter, our lady friend at the back, mentioned about the role of Parliament. She mentioned about the fact that Cyprus is an honourable member of the Commonwealth. For many years, Cyprus is a member of the European Union. So its credentials are all there. But, and the reference, I think, by Jim, to the Council of Europe. I was a member of the Council of Europe for 25 years. And I can remember, and possibly you can, Peter, I still have the reports at my home, when Geoffrey Finsbury, who then became Lord Finsbury, and although he was a Conservative, as our parliamentary colleague knows, irrespective of that, you do build up friendships with people, and you work together with people. And Geoffrey Finsbury presented a very extensive report. I don't know if the High Commissioner was then in Strasbourg, but it was discussed. It was overwhelmingly supported, but nothing ever happened. Also at that time, and possibly again the High Commissioner remembers this, there was a cuckoo report by a Spanish deputy who was scathing about the attitude of the mainland Turkey and the Turkish Cypriot administration. Again, nothing was done. When I was a member here, I saw Tony Blair on 4 occasions. After the first one, Peter, I realised I was wasting my time. He just was not interested. But people used to say, Tom, go and see Blair. Make sure Blair understands. Blair understood, but he didn't want to do anything. And that, Peter, concluding my remarks, I hope we're not going to feel, when we go away from here, well, what we've had, it was nice to see different members of Parliament here showing their support, but at the end of the night, are we going to leave this building, Peter, and really feel, yes, something will certainly happen. Now that there have been the discovery of gas and oil around the island of Cyprus, is that now going to be the trade point to get Turkey involved? Chris, my dear friend, who's a Cypriot, showed me a report that was published in a Turkish newspaper, wasn't it? Where apparently the Americans are now willing to do a deal that brings Turkey on board for a settlement in return for a share of the gas and oil deposits. Is that true? Peter, you and Andreas and many colleagues here have spent years and years of your life trying to get an honourable settlement that the people of Cyprus, even after 39 years, are entitled to respect. But I have to say, Peter, and you know I've been to many meetings, I will be at the rally on Sunday. But Peter, deep down in my heart, I don't see, sadly, any real real progress?
I spent 35 years getting oil and gas out of the ground. So about a year and a half ago, I offered what small skill I might have to the Cyprus government to try and help them to make the best out of this treasure which you have discovered off your shores. And can I just start by saying that I understand completely the tragedy and the emotion, and I want to pay a huge respect to all of you here and offer my condolences for all that you've been through. I've tried to learn a little bit about both sides of this discussion, and I still don't understand it. Let me just make that absolutely clear. So I'm also, like Caroline, a novice, but I do want to help. And I just want to put a glimmer of hope on the table, and I want to be an optimist, and I've said this before. And I do believe, actually, that the recent change of government, the recent economic the problems that we've had in Cyprus, and they have been real, believe me, I live there, and I see the pain on the faces of ordinary people who are living through the economic crisis today. But I believe that provides a real opportunity to look for different ways of solving this. And let me just, very briefly, if I may, suggest what that might be. Europe is desperately short of energy, alternative energy supplies. And other people here are looking at other ways. And that gives you some leverage. Not just because you have discovered gas off your own shores, but because, as always and for the last thousands of years, you are geopolitically and geographically perfectly positioned to be able to be a place where gas could be gathered from all around this troubled area and brought to Europe. Cyprus represents somewhere at the very bottom, the toe of Europe, if you like, which is very, very close to enormous reserves of gas. And I'm not going to mention all those places. They're all troubled places. They're all places which at the minute don't know how to export their gas. Yeah, so it's not just the gas that you have off your own island, which I totally agree with is your gas. Yeah? It's the opportunity that you would have if only we could resolve a few little minor issues which would allow Limassol and Cyprus to become an energy hub to bring not just the 3 or 4 TCF, which has been discovered off your own shores, but the 80, 90, maybe 200 TCF of gas which is trapped all around the Levant by strife and by the fact that it can't get out towards the south. There is a massive opportunity. So just in closing, I would encourage you to be optimistic, to recognise that despite all the pain of the last 40 or 50 years, if only some form of compromise could be reached, if only it would be possible for Greek Cypriots to imagine there might be a way in which they could trust their northern neighbours, because that's what it would take, and the resolution of the problem, there would be an enormous economic opportunity for you for years and years to come. And just to close, Europe today doesn't make money out of the gas under its own boundaries. It makes money by transporting gas around the European Union. That is how money is made. That's how you can do it for 40 or 50 years. I just encourage you to think positively about the opportunity. Thank you.
As an observer, so I come from the academia, so I think I'm slightly more cynical maybe than...
What's your name?
Anna probably.
Thank you.
I'm going to be making some comments more than I don't really have any questions, particular questions. I think the main problem that we back in Cyprus see lies primarily with the Cyprus government. Because I hear people here just talking about how we should put pressure on the British government, on the Parliament, on the House of Lords, etc., to help Cyprus. But the main question I think remains, what does Cyprus want? Do we know what we want? I mean, what does this help goes towards to? I mean, do we want pressure on Turkey to sit on the grand negotiating table? Do we want them to come to an agreement on the natural gas deal? Do we want human rights to be upheld? Do we want a federation? We don't really know what we want as Cypriots, I think. And that's the first question we need to ask ourselves. Because our government... Yes, okay, I'm just posing the questions, okay, I'm not making... I think the main problem lies with the Cypriots and the Cyprus government to decide exactly what kind of help do we need from the British. Now, secondly, as people respond to incentives, I think governments respond to interest. So what we need to put on the table when we ask anything from the British government, as Mr. Thompson rightly said, is not a question of them not knowing what is right and wrong. It's not wanting to do what is right in the way we see it. So what we need to place the emphasis on is basically what kind of profit or benefit will the British have by assisting the Cyprus government in reaching a certain objective. So natural gas is one given on the table now. The British bases and security considerations, bearing in mind that Syria is about to collapse sooner rather than later. I think this consideration should be firmly placed on the table. Now, as far as sharing any of our natural gas deposits with the Turks, I agree with the lady here, it's not the Turkish Cypriots we really need to be concerned about. Personally, as an analyst, I keep Turkish Cypriots mostly out of the equation because they don't really matter. It's Turkey, it's Cyprus, not matter, I'm talking in terms of policy. I have a lot of Turkish Cypriot friends, don't get me wrong, sir, because I see you've got a very heavy Turkish. It's not what I meant. I meant that in a policy, high policy level, who you're dealing with is really the Turkish government. And in business deals, win-win works. But when you have to deal with Turkey, and we see how Turkey has been dealing with its own citizens, just as we speak in Taksim Square, and a lot of my friends are actually there at this moment, I think we need to understand that the dialectic, at the stage of dialectic we are with Turkey is totally different. So that's a really big problem. How do you really come to a deal with someone which is not a democratic state, which is a truly authoritarian state, whose appetite is really getting greater with the discovery of natural gas deposits? I think that's a very, very serious consideration. And security-wise, the minority in Cyprus really is not the Turkish Cypriots. It's the Greek Cypriots vis-a-vis the Turks, because it's the Turkish army which is occupying the island. So theoretically, it's a good way of thinking things out. But I think we really need to understand that Turkey is totally different from Cyprus on a democratic development stage, and that creates a very big problem when negotiating with them.
I want to bring into the knowledge of the honourable members of the Parliament an incident which happened recently in Cyprus between the Dean of the University of Cyprus and an imam. The Dean of the University of Cyprus visited Carpathia Peninsula when he was approached by an imam who said to him, "Look, you are Dean, you are a very educated person, Dean of the university, but Cyprus soon will become an Islamic country. If we look at the numbers of the settlers who are in Cyprus now, in the hundreds of thousands, it makes sense what he said. I don't want to add any comments. It just depicts clearly what the intentions of Turkey are about Cyprus. Thank you.
For 39 years now we've been hearing what you are like, it's intolerable, it's unacceptable, and we have to do more. We've been trying to do more. We even tried the carrot and the stick, fewer peace said. Obviously Turkey doesn't understand. And what we want is freedom. What we want is the Turkey to take the 40,000 troops and go back to Turkey and allow the Turkish Cypriot and the Greek Cypriots to find solution. President Christofias, he came to some kind of understanding with Talat. But he couldn't go all the way. He stopped halfway. And why? Because the deep country, the state of Turkey, it will not allow Talat to progress and find solution. So whatever we say here now, unless Turkey decides it's time to solve the problem, Cyprus problem will be there in 30, 40 years. What do you want? To give half of the oil so he can give us a solution? No, Mr. Erdogan. The gas and the oil and the paraffin, whatever they're going to find there, it belongs to the Turkish Cypriot, to the Greek Cypriot, Armenians, Maronites, and Latins, not to Turkey. Thank you.
Should stand and rather than make a standard speech at this occasion. I think you've probably had a number of those this evening. I thought I might try and just pick out some of the issues that have been raised in the brief time that I've been here. So I do apologise to you for being late. I am a labouring cooperative member of Parliament, and the cooperative part asked me to attend a meeting along the corridor. So I've been being grilled for 3/4 of an hour, and so I'm hoping you'll give me a much easier time than I've had so far this evening. But what I'd like to pick up, the first contribution I heard when I arrived was a young lady at the back speaking about the role of youth. And the first thing I think that everyone will recognise is, of course, our young people are the future. And the attitude they strike towards all of these issues will be critically important to trying to find a way forward that's successful rather than all the failures that we've talked about for the last 39 years. And I think that it is absolutely critical that our young people engage with this in whichever way they find most appropriate. But I would say that acting as part of civil society can really bring benefits to the Cyprus situation. Now, I don't believe, I'm a politician, and I do believe you have to bring all the forces on all sides to the negotiating table in order to find a solution. So I'm conventional in that way, but I'm very much of the view that civil society in all sorts of ways can play a formative role in bringing us all of the different negotiating parties to the table. And indeed, if we look at current events in other countries, then we can see the role that civil society can play and does play. And I think that perhaps that's been one of the things that hasn't been as much in play throughout the last 39 years as it should have been. We talk a lot about confidence building measures, we talk about reaching across the green line, we talk about various initiatives, but actually mobilising ordinary people through their civil society organisations, through our young people, would be a way of galvanising opinion on both sides. But of course, as others have said, if we were to leave the Greek Cypriot community and the Turkish Cypriot community to resolve this matter, it probably would have been resolved a long time ago. The complexities of what is happening in the north makes it difficult for the Turkish Cypriot community to speak solely on behalf of people in the north of the island, and of course we have in the background the international community, but in regard to finding a solution, particularly Turkey. And that brings me on to the lady over here, who I think raised the two, I think everybody, there would be a consensus in this room that the two major issues that we have to deal with to find a solution is the role of the United Kingdom, and it's both its historic role, but also its treaty role as a guarantor power, and indeed in all sorts of other ways. What role should Britain be playing, and why hasn't that, if it has been playing that role, why hasn't it been more successful than it has been? And I'll go into that in a moment. And of course the other is Turkey. What are Turkey's objectives in all of this? And are we whistling in the wind and trying to believe that there are circumstances in which Turkey could be persuaded to enter the negotiating process as an open and contributing party, and could that lead to a solution? So let me start with Britain's role. I think it's appropriate. I don't have any sensitivities. I know some others do, but I don't have any sensitivities to raising the sovereign basis. They were part of the 1960 agreements, and they have, for all sorts of reasons, the consensus has been not to complicate the issue between the Republic of Cyprus and the United Kingdom by raising the sovereign basis, but if it was felt appropriate, I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be done, although I do think it would complicate an existing complicated situation. But I think that the role for Britain is fairly clear-cut. We have a very large Cypriot community living in Britain, most of whom have become British citizens. We have a large, although they tell me slightly declining population of British people who live in Cyprus. So there are lots of connections, direct connections between our two societies. Indeed, I think Britain is still by far the largest tourist group that go to Cyprus. And so there's that connection that, although I'm always surprised by the number of people who come back and I say, did you see the Green Line? They say, what Green Line? So often they're not as well aware in visiting Cyprus about the current situation, and perhaps that's something we ought to draw more to their attention. But the role of Britain is clear. We took on responsibility in days gone by. We have a long association that came to an abrupt change in 1960. We were, as part of those London and Zurich agreements, we became a guarantor power. We have some influence in the world through the Commonwealth, the Security Council, the European Union, and in many different ways, we still are a player. And I think, I don't think I'm overstating Britain's role in saying that when it comes to Cyprus and the Cypriot issue, many in the international community turn to the United Kingdom as the country that has the closest connections for all the reasons I've said, and therefore look to the United Kingdom to give a lead as an international player in trying to move the situation forward. So I think there is a critical role for Britain. It has played that role to some extent in the sense that it has been a partner in the high-level agreements. It was a partner to the UN-sponsored talks. It has contributed diplomatically to bringing the parties together and trying to seek consensus, but it hasn't been successful. And that leads me certainly to the conclusion, and I think the people in this room, to the conclusion that Britain is not doing enough. And the way I resolve that, what should they do that they're not doing now? The way I would suggest that they should act is to accept that Cyprus needs to be pumped up the international agenda. We need to get Cyprus as a major issue, and certainly in the Mediterranean and Eastern Mediterranean in particular. We need to set it in context of the developing situation with oil and gas and how the continuing dispute and division that exists around Cyprus and the failure to agree with Turkey on anything bedevils that relationship. It bedevils the relationships in the Eastern Mediterranean. It complicates the life of NATO, and of course it complicates all of the international community, many of whom, like Britain, would like to see Turkey enter into the European Union, so that, if I can put it that way, those forces that are out there on the streets demonstrating in Turkey at the present time for a secular democratic republic will succeed, and those forces that wish to take Turkey in an entirely different direction will fail. But we need to ensure that our role is to enhance the possibilities that we can reach agreement in the Eastern Mediterranean, that we won't allow the continuing friction to make life more difficult rather than less difficult. So I think the United Kingdom has an important role, particularly because it's a member of the UN Security Council, because it's an international player, because it's one of the 3 biggest economies in the European Union. For all of those reasons, in my view, Britain should be raising Cyprus at all of those forums, should be continuing to argue that the international community should be ashamed of itself that 39 years after the events of 1974, we still have a divided island. We still have 2 communities that hardly interact. We still have the domination of one part of the island by a foreign power. All of those things should be an outrage to the international community, and Britain has a role to play in ensuring that that's got across to in all those international forums, and that we do get Cyprus up that international agenda. Which brings me on to Turkey, and I'm not sure I need to say very much here, except to recognise that those who live in northern Cyprus, whether they be Turkish Cypriots or people from the mainland, are under the are controlled by the Turkish army who are present on the island at the present time. Interestingly enough, I read in my newspapers a couple of days ago that there are similar demonstrations in Nicosia, in the northern part of the island, as has happened in Taksim Square in Turkey, and that Turkish Cypriots not only are arguing for democracy and a secular state, but they're also arguing for a change in the relationship with Turkey. And that does seem to me to hold out the promise. Now, I don't know what the demographic situation is. I don't know who's... I know that, according to reports, there are 16,000 additional people on the registration forms in the north of the island in relation to the elections that are coming up at the end of this month. And the presumption will be that most of them will be settlers from the mainland. I don't know what the situation is, but undoubtedly the Turkish Cypriot community still have enormous influence in the north of the island, and still in many ways are arguing for a change that would accord with people in the Republic of Cyprus, and may be the start of a rapprochement between the 2 sides that could lead to negotiations. But of course we have to recognise the domination that Turkey has had on the island since 1974, and we have to do something at the international level to address that. And of course I come back, as always, to the argument about why Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus, should support Turkey's membership of the European Union, because it is the one significant lever that we have that can bring Turkey round to having a very strong, motivating view as to why they need a solution in Cyprus, because that will be a condition of membership of the European Union. I look at the debates that are going on in Turkey at the present time, all the demonstrations that have been. The reality is, all the indications are that the AK party, perhaps the most Islamist party that's been in control in Turkey, certainly since Mustafa Kemal was in power pre-war, yet they have stated very clearly that they continue to see as a priority for them joining the European Union. And there are many, and I won't go into them, there are many, many good reasons why. But there are also good reasons from our perspective as to why. First of all, it would entrench democratic values. Secondly, it would deal, at least one would hope it would deal, with the deep state that currently exists that the chairman talked about as to why you have to be somewhat sceptical about the quality of the democracy in Turkey. It would deal with all of those human rights issues that continue to flare up in Turkey at different times. But primarily for this audience, it would deal with the continued division of Cyprus as an island, and would reunite the Greek and Turkish Cypriot communities in a way that would be acceptable to both sides. And so that's what we have to continue to do. It was put to us, there are only Caroline and I think, here now from Parliament. I think I can speak not only on behalf of the two of us, but indeed I suspect all the others that have been here tonight. And I say this continuously, but it is the absolute truth. You have many, many friends in Parliament. Those friends raise the issue of Cyprus. We don't get, and this is not a party political, because it happened under previous governments, and this is the situation that's gone on for 39 years. You've had it under all governments. We don't do enough as a country. But we pledge ourselves, as we do each year, as we come up to the anniversary of the tragic events of 1974, we re-pledge ourselves to continue to work as hard as we can to ensure that the British government is seized with the need for them to do more internationally to raise Cyprus up the political agenda. Part of the thing in doing that is to have a good relationship between our two governments. Gordon Brown and Mr. Christofias cemented that. I hope that David Cameron will meet with the new President, Mr. Anastasiades. That will be one way in which we can clear the air. But the reality is that we must continue to fight, if I can use an old hackneyed phrase, because these events 50 years ago, in 1963, a former leader of the Parliamentary Labour Party, Hugh Gaitskell, died. And Hugh Gaitskell said, and it's perhaps the most famous thing he ever uttered, was he would fight, fight and fight again. And I think that's got to be the attitude. I know it's the attitude of this audience. That's got to be the attitude of British parliamentarians fighting on your behalf to try and bring the parties together in a sizable renegotiation.
Thank you, Peter. And I would wish to reinforce something both Tom and Andy have said, that actually this issue is not a party political issue in the UK. It's something on which Cyprus will find it has it has friends on all sides of the House, and governments of all colours over the last 39 years have not done enough. But as Andy said, you come here every year to reinvigorate our efforts, to remind us that it is our duty, certainly my duty as a Conservative MP, to raise this with the government, with the Foreign Secretary, and to Mary, who I think at the end put a challenge to the members of Parliament present, what are you going to do? I say with some shame in front of this audience that Cyprus is not an issue that I have raised in the House of Commons, but it will be now.
I want to thank all of them, and tonight we've had a fair number who turned up outside as well, who are unable to join us, including Mike, who has just been, Lord Harris, Toby Harris, Matthew Offord. We had Tracy Crouch, who's a Conservative Member of Parliament for Chatham, and Wayne David as well. And I want to thank all of them. I want to acknowledge the presence of Councillor George Peepers, who is Deputy Mayor for Cambridge, who is delighted you're here representing Cambridge officially. And George has been a great help to the Federation and to me personally in terms of engaging with Julian Huppert, who was here earlier, introducing me to Julian and really enabling us to develop a relationship. And I know that there's another councillor here who's sitting at the back, and that's Councillor Βασιλείου, right? Yeah. And Councillor Βασιλείου is a councillor in Southampton. And so it seems to me that this is how this community works now, that we have people up and down the country who use their influence, who use their positions within different parties to make a difference, you know, and their influence, their networks, you know, are crucial to what we do in this house, because that is how we develop relationships with members of parliament. We shall never give up this struggle. It's a difficult struggle, it's an unequal struggle, but we will be here year after year until Cyprus is reunited for all Cypriots, until Turkey leaves the island to its rightful owners. And these are the Cypriots and not Turks from Turkey. We have a big event on Sunday, the 14th of July, and I want to make a special plea to all of you to spread the word, to be at that event. We start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the picketing outside the Turkish embassy in Belgrave Square. And then we will march through central London via Piccadilly down to Trafalgar Square. And that is our biggest event of the year. And your presence there would be highly valued. And please spread the word, because it's important to send out a message to Turkey, but also to the British government about their own responsibilities in relation to Cyprus. So thank you very much for being here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.